Jai Sri Hare Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pujane Namaste Shasanyamari Pustati Devi. Om Agyanatimanandasya Janarjana Salakaya Chaksu Sumilitai Jaya Tasmai Sri Gurave Namah Sri Caitanya Manabhistam Stapitam Vena Bhutale Sayam Yukatavanayam Vedati Sattvam. Panchakalpachivistra Kritisandadevisa Kritisnam Pavineja Vaishnava Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Krishna Vitale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Krishna Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pujane Namaste Shasanyamari Pustati Hare Krishna. Very often at the beginning of a class that I'm giving regularly, I'll ask a very, very difficult question. And that very difficult question is even more difficult today to ask it. So I'm not going to ask it, but I'll tell you what it is anyway. Most difficult question. Does anyone remember anything from the last class? Because it was a whole week ago. What to speak of yesterday? Yes, Brajmohan.
Talking about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu, they're going to Advaitacharya's house and they're having prasadam.
Just about that, prasadam. Can you remember?
Prasadam.
Very good. But and I started reading a purport, but it's such an interesting purport. So I'd like to continue reading it. And there was so much opulent food that was cooked by Advaitacharya's wife. Incredible amount of food, so opulent and so amazing. So and it was set out on 3 plates. One plate, and each of the plates had tulsi, meaning they were being offered to Vishnu, Lord Vishnu in Vishnu Tattva. So the middle plate was offered to Krishna, and the other 2 were meant for Gaura and Nitai, because Advaitacharya was clear about the identity of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu, that they were not of this world. So Mahaprabhu, he said, there's so much opulent food here. Where's my part? I'm just a sannyasi, and I just eat very, very humbly, just a little bit of this, just a handful, mushti, 1 handful. So then Mahaprabhu said, it is not proper for a sannyasi to eat such a variety of foods. If he does, how can he control his senses? So here's Srila Prabhupada's purport. The word upakarana indicates a variety of foods. What does the word upakarana indicate?
A variety of food.
Very good. Such as dal, vegetables, and other varieties of possible dishes that one can eat very nicely with rice. It is not proper, however, for a sannyasi to eat such palatable dishes. If he did so, he would not be able to control his senses. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not encourage sannyasis to eat very palatable dishes, for the whole Vaishnava cult is Vairagya Vidya, as renounced as possible. I think I read up to this part last week. So the whole Gaudiya Vaishnava movement is Vairagya Vidya, which means that everything is meant for Krishna's service, because everything is Krishna's energy. And for ourselves, for us insignificant living entities, we take what we need. So Prabhupada put that together, that concept together, saying that Vairagya Vidya as renounced as possible, or one could say as renounced as is practical. Because one has to live a practical life. And Prabhupada once told the story of one of his exalted godbrothers. He was ill on Ekadasi. His name at that time was Hayagriva Brahmachari, Prabhupada mentioned, and then he became Madhava Maharaj, Sripad Madhava Maharaj. And then, so he was ill, lying down, and on Ekadasi, everyone in those days used to perform Nirjal Ekadasi. No one would eat, no one would drink in the mat. So Hayagriva Brahmachari, Prabhupada said, he was feeling weak. So what he did was he ate, of course not grains, but he ate and then went out and preached. And the comment of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was, he actually understands the mood of the Gaudiya Math, which means it was preaching, because the detachment that one has to, one gains by minimizing one's eating, the kind of dress one wears, and in those days a sannyasi, even a brahmachari, before he's initiated or until he completes his brahmachari, he could not travel. He had to only walk from place to place. Even Krishna walked all the way from Braj to Mathura to Avantipur because he hadn't finished his brahmachari training, so he walked. And there was Srila Prabhupada traveling by aeroplanes. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur set the standard for this, that everything not only should be used in Krishna's service, but must be used in Krishna's service. It's not ours to renounce. We can't give it up. Just like when he was leaving, he picked up the harmonium and then put it down and said, I'm renouncing this harmonium. Now, that's ridiculous because it wasn't his to renounce. So similarly, there's nothing in this material world that actually belongs to us, and the proof of that is that things that belong to you take with you when you leave, and things that don't belong to you, you have to leave behind. So what do we actually take with us when we leave this world? So this basic concept that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur stressed is that everything must be used in the service of Krishna. It's Krishna's energy. It must be used in his service. It is not, and that is yukta vairagya. That is yukta vairagya, the detachment due to giving up the concept of this is mine and meant for my pleasure, because that's what false ego forces us to do. This is what false ego specifically forces us to do, to see everything in this world as if it's meant for us and our pleasure. And that entangles us. It gives us so much trouble as we go through life in thousands of ways. So Prabhupada continues in his purport, as renounced as possible. Caitanya Mahaprabhu also advised Raghunath Das Goswami not to eat very palatable dishes, wear very nice garments, or talk on mundane subjects. These things are all prohibited for those in the renounced order. So on a morning walk in Fiji, Prabhupada was actually speaking like this. I was present. He said that sannyasis should minimize their eating and sleeping. So I asked Prabhupada, what about householders? And Prabhupada said, oh, householders, they can eat and sleep 24 hours a day. He had a sarcastic sense of humor, didn't he? Because the idea is that that the sannyas has taken a stand. That I am not here in this material world to enjoy myself. He's made up his mind. He wants to he's determined to go through life taking shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna. Because that is the path to take shelter of Krishna. Krishna, I am yours. How can I serve you with Krishna in the center? And the struggle for existence in this world is so difficult because we tend to keep ourselves in the center and think in terms of what I want and what's good for me. Well, what we saw with the example of Srila Prabhupada and other great souls in Prabhupada's followers, that some of them, that Prabhupada, and they're so serious about serving Krishna. Everything for Krishna. Krishna is the center. So the path of Mahaprabhu is Yukta Vairagya. As renounced as possible, as renounced as practical. So Mahaprabhu's path also allows for different stages in getting to that very exalted stage too. And just to remain on the path is glorious. So that everything is revealed gradually in Caitanya Caritamrta. But this continues, and this I found very interesting, and please listen, because I'll ask you a question. A devotee does not accept anything to eat that is not first offered to Krishna. All the rich foods offered to Krishna are given to the grihastas, the householders. There are many nice things offered to Krishna: garlands, bedsteads, nice ornaments, nice foods, and even nicely prepared pan, betel nuts. But a humble Vaishnava, thinking his body material and nasty, does not accept such preparations for himself. He thinks that by accepting such things, he would offend the lotus feet of the Lord. Now, so strong. A humble Vaishnava thinks his body material and nasty. Now, what does that mean? Raise your hand if you, when you think of yourself, you think, oh, I have such a nasty body. Probably only Vasudam.
Thank you.
I mean, not that you have one, but you have such a renounced temperament. But what a strong statement. A humble Vaishnava thinks his body material and nasty. We could even put it, and therefore nasty. Now, what does that mean? And why would we think like that? Why would a Vaishnava think like that? Because it's comparative to who we actually are. Someone in this world may have a very powerful body or a beautiful body or a body of sattva gun, the mode of goodness, but compared to his real identity, his spiritual identity, that is full of eternity. It is eternity, bliss and knowledge. And it's all in relationship with Krishna. And it has to be of that quality to associate with Krishna. So compared to that, a material body which covers the soul's actual identity is quite nasty. It's low class. It's horrible in that sense, and I don't want to get into the horrible nature of a material body because not that we're recommending anyone do this, but if we think we have a beautiful body, if we just took off like the top little layer of skin, not that we should do such things to ourselves or to others, but it doesn't look very beautiful when that little beautiful, quote, beautiful layer is pulled off. And yet, by the power of illusion, we're also attracted to it, and we're happy to see just on the surface. We're more than happy to see on the surface. We don't want to see below the surface, because that would ruin the illusion. And we prefer the illusion to reality. Why? Because, why? Why do we prefer the illusion to reality?
Because we came here to be separate from Krishna.
Yes, I was thinking because we don't have that trust and experience of the higher realm, and therefore this is all we have. And if it's all we have, we're going to hold on to it tightly. Because it's all we have. So that shouldn't be all we will ever have. And it shouldn't be all that we want, all we aspire for. So he thinks his body material and nasty. He does not accept such preparations for himself. He thinks by accepting such things he will offend the lotus feet of the Lord. Why would accepting how is it possible for something like the Lord's remnants to be improper to accept? And how could it possibly be offensive to accept it? Of course it isn't. But what is his thinking? Yes.
Because we think of it as something that we can use to enjoy.
Yes. True. But like we don't take, because it's based on the premise that the material body is nasty. So when you have a holy item, you don't bring it into a filthy place. One doesn't bring one's beads or the deities or kartals, madanga, or anything holy into a dirty, dirty, filthy place, such as a bathroom, toilet. One wouldn't, it's not right to do that. So the humble Vaishnava, not proud of his body, even though his body may be so spiritualized because of his practices and use of it in Krishna's service, he sees it as a nasty thing, covering over who he really is, and he doesn't want to bring these holy things in contact with it. Does that answer okay, Braj Mohan? So, and yet we see that Mahaprabhu, so many, when we receive a garland from the Lord, what would we do what would happen? Is it appropriate to say, no, I'm not exalted enough, elevated enough to accept this garland or this Mahaprasadam or anything? No, we have to honor it. And Mahaprabhu's associates and Mahaprabhu himself honored Mahaprasadam like anything. They were, as Kaviraj Goswami says, they weren't used to eating in small quantities of Jagannath Mahaprasadam. So the balance of these things, Prabhupada here in the purport is explaining some important principles, especially right now he's explaining how renounced he's explaining the sannyas order of life, the determination that as Mahaprabhu was an ideal sannyasi. And in Kali Yuga, the order of sannyas, especially, is meant for preaching, Pariprajakacharya. So that is really the austerity, not sleeping on the floor and not accepting prasadam and garlands and things. But the preaching is an austerity. It's an austerity because you always have to be fixed, and you have to. Why is preaching an austerity? Because we don't. Yeah, go ahead.
Just put yourself out there and take a lot of flack.
Yeah, people criticize you, and Mahaprabhu, there was this one pastime when Mahaprabhu was going with Nanda Prabhu to Advaita Acharya's house. He was in Shantipur, and Nitai and he were walking, and there was a tantric sannyasi, and the tantric sannyasi living in a house with his wife, and they invited him in, and Mahaprabhu was very young at this time, and the sannyasi was, so-called sannyasi was elderly, and he, at some point he was pleased with Mahaprabhu, so he blessed him that he will have all material enjoyment. And Mahaprabhu replied, this isn't the purpose of life, to have material enjoyment. One can't really enjoy in the material world. This isn't the proper blessing. So the sannyasi said, just see, you try to do good for someone and they criticize you. It's a funny little episode. And then it continues with the sannyasi. He says, would you like some ananda? And by that he meant some wine. Would you like some ananda? And Mahaprabhu was very innocent. He kept on saying this. Would you like some ananda? And Mahaprabhu was very innocent. And he asked Nitai, what does he mean when he says that? Nitai said, he wants to know if we want some wine. And Mahaprabhu went, ah! He got up and both he and Nitai laughed and jumped into the Ganga with all their clothes on and swam all the way to Advaitacharya's house. Anyway, interesting little interlude. So, continuing. When Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu did not accept the food that had already been served, Advaitacharya said, please give up your concealment. Because Advaitacharya knew that Mahaprabhu was the Supreme Lord. I know what you are, and I know the confidential meaning, the secret meaning, Bhari Bhuri, the secret meaning, the confidential meaning of your accepting the sannyas order. Advaitacharya thus requested Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to eat and give up Vachana Chaturi, this juggling of words. The Lord replied, I certainly cannot eat so much food. Advaitacharya then requested the Lord to simply accept the prasadam without pretense. What does pretense mean?
Like, without...
Pretending.
Pretending, yes.
Yeah. Without pretending that he was just a sannyasi, not the Supreme Lord. If he could not eat it all, Advaitacharya said, the balance could be left on the plate. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, I will not be able to eat so much food, and it is not the duty of a sannyasi to leave remnants. So here, such an interesting proposal. Sannyasis should just take what they need. They go out. Traditionally, they would go and beg, and whatever they could fit in their hand, they could get from a householder, and then they would eat that. And there's not going to be any remnants, and they shouldn't leave remnants. But yet we see nowadays sannyasis, for example, do leave remnants, and very often their disciples will very happily accept those remnants. So there's different roles they may have. They may have sannyasi role, they may have guru role. So how to mix those two together? How do you find out what the actual proper actions are? So, and that is described in the Mahabharata, where it says that because the secret of the purpose of Shastra, it is very secret actually, because it's easy to just accept it superficially and just do it superficially without understanding the purpose of the Shastric injunction. And we'll hear about the two sides of how to subvert Shastra very, very soon. So it's easy to do that. So how do you know what the right activity is? One learns Mahajena. What's the rest? Mahasapanta. That one has to watch the activities of the great souls, and from them we learn the proper balance between all these seeming contradictory activities. So then there was a saying amongst the disciples of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur that I read in His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Maharaj's book, Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhav, that he said that the disciples used to say there were two things that were especially tasty from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and one was his dal remnants, and the other was his chastisements. So even just see the consciousness. It's a different way of looking at life, to see a chastisement as a blessing. And what's the opposite of what do most people want instead of chastisements? What do most people want? They want to be complimented and flattered, and oh, you're doing so wonderfully, and everything is so great, you're the greatest. It's what most people like to hear, and it's so easy to be cheated like that. But getting the correction of a great soul means that a great soul cares for you. He cares for you so much that he's going to help you get closer on the path. So how serious one has to be, what to speak of to be a sannyasi, how serious one has to be a disciple. How sincere really it takes to move forward on the path. So Prabhupada in his purport cites a verse from the Bhagavatam that says that sannyasis should not leave anything for others, any remnants. In this connection, Advaita Acharya referred to Caitanya Mahaprabhu when he said, "You can eat it. You give up your pretense. Don't stop pretending you're just a sannyasi. You are the Supreme Lord." In this connection, Advaita Acharya referred to Caitanya Mahaprabhu's eating a Jagannath Puri. Lord Jagannath and Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu are identical. Advaita Acharya pointed out that at Jagannath Puri, Caitanya Mahaprabhu ate 54 times a day, and each time he ate many hundreds of pots of food. Would you like to be Lord Jagannath? Everyone just feed you all day long? You can't be Lord Jagannath even if you'd like to. So you can become Jagannath Dasa. And Advaita Acharya continued, "By my great fortune, you have just come to my home. Mora Bhagya, Mora Gari. You have come, my fortune, my home, you've come. Tomara Agamana. You've come to my home. Chadaha Chatori. Give up your pretension. Give up your word jugglery, your making believe that you can't eat this much food. Prabhu, Karaha Bhojanam, please, Prabhu, please take food. Please eat." So it's interesting also, it sounds like sweet when you say that, but here's the verse in English and you can read it, so it sounds very hard almost. Advaita Acharya continued, "By my great fortune you have just come to my house. Please do not juggle words. Just begin eating and do not talk." But that wasn't the mood in which he said it, and that wasn't the intonations that he spoke. Very, very sweet. Karaha Bhojana, please take. It's my great fortune that you... And just see how Sita Thakurani, she's cooked this with so much devotion just for your pleasure. It's so fortunate you've come, and now we want to feed you. Please accept this food. And please don't be in the mood of that you're a sannyasi and you'll just eat one palmful of rice. And amongst Mahaprabhu's followers, there were those in the renounced order that were so renounced. And who's the personification of renunciation amongst Mahaprabhu's followers? Of course, all the Goswamis were renounced. Raghunath Das, when he would, in the sixth chapter of Adya Lila, describes how by the end, how he would eat rice that was rejected. It was so bad that the cows wouldn't even eat it. He would wash it and get rid of the rotten part. He would eat that, and then Mahaprabhu came and he said, I want to taste that. He was just encouraging him in his renunciation. He was so renounced. And all the Goswamis were so renounced, all the devotees. Upon saying this, Advaitacharya supplied water to the two lords so that they could wash their hands. The two lords then sat down and, smiling, began to eat the prasadam. So all this is pastimes. So here's an interesting part of the pastime that continues. Nityananda Prabhu said, so what was Mahaprabhu's mood? That all this food, how is it possible for me to eat it all? And it's so opulent. And Nityananda Prabhu said, I have undergone fasting for 3 days, continuously. And today, I had hoped to break my fast. Although Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was thinking that the quantity of food was enormous, Nityananda Prabhu, on the contrary, thought it not even one morsel, not even a little bit. He had been fasting for 3 days and had greatly hoped to break fast on that day. Indeed, he said, although I am invited to eat by Advaitacharya, today also is a fast. So small a quantity of food will not even fill half of my belly. So Advaitacharya and Nityananda Prabhu had their relationship where they would tease each other. So Advaitacharya replied, Sir, you are a mendicant traveling on pilgrimage. Sometimes you eat fruits and roots, and sometimes you simply go on fasting. And I am a poor Brahmin, and you have come to my house. Please be satisfied with whatever little food you have received and give up your greedy mentality. Nityananda Prabhu replied, whatever I may be, you have invited me. Therefore you must supply as much as I want to eat. His Divine Grace Advaitacharya, after hearing the statements of Nityananda Prabhu, took the opportunity presented by the joking words, and he spoke to him as follows. So he continued the playful criticisms. Advaitacharya said, you are a rejected Paramhansa, and you have accepted the renounced order of life just to fill up your belly. I can understand that your business is to give trouble to Brahmanas. Because Advaitacharya was the Brahmanas, and Nityananda was the one in the renounced order of life. So Mahaprabhu was teaching what the renounced order of life is, how detached one would be. Now, should be, must be. The detachment means attachment to Krishna. Because only then could one really be renounced from the material world. Param vristva navartate. So there are two sides, two aberrations, two mistakes one can make, and are often made. One is one takes sannyas as Advaitacharya is accusing Nityananda Prabhu of doing, and this was the nature of their accusing each other. They were teaching what not to do. So don't be a sannyasi for the purpose of enjoying your senses, for sense gratification. And as Prabhupada sometimes explained, that in Vrindavan, some people, if someone can't figure out how to earn their livelihood and feed themselves, they become a mendicant. Someone superficially in the renounced order of life, and therefore, and they go, because of Vrindavan, they feed all the people in the renounced order of life, so therefore their eating problem is solved by wearing saffron and being a so-called sannyasi in that way. So the motivation isn't attachment to Krishna, but it's to live in the material world comfortably. And in India, people respect those who are sannyasis, so they'll take care of them in general. But to be taken care of isn't the purpose of being a sannyasi. The purpose is to serve Krishna. And then, the way that the society is organized, then you will be taken care of because of your higher mission in life. But not to... So Advaitacharya would always accuse Nityananda of being a sense enjoyer in the dress of a sannyasi. So he was pointing out that should not be done. And on the other side, Nityananda Prabhu would accuse Advaitacharya of being a smarta brahmana, which means those who just follow the rules and regulations of the Vedas and very, 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 very proud that they're following the rules and regulations of the Vedas, but have no idea of what the purpose of the Vedas is. Vedescha Savarahametu Vidyo. Don't care anything about the purpose and what is supposed to be achieved by the following of the rules and regulations. But as long as we're following them, then everything is perfect. And there's a pride that comes along with that, and that pride looks down upon those who are not following the strictures, the rules and regulations of the community like they are following it. So Advaitacharya would accuse Nityananda of being a rejected Paramahamsa, superficially, for material reasons, enjoying in the garb of a person in the renounced order of life. And then Nityananda would accuse Advaitacharya of being a smarta brahmana, who's just following the rules and regulations for the purpose unknown or the purpose of attaining some material enjoyment. Superficiality and enjoyment. So they'd accuse each other in that way, and they would joke with each other in that way, but the purpose of it all is to teach us hearers and readers of Caitanya Caritamrta, what we should avoid and what we should not only avoid, but what we should do, and to taste the sweetness of Krishna consciousness. And that part comes right after when Mahaprabhu moves into the realm of the positive. Because all the devotees are going to come. Let's see if we'll get up to that point today. I'll keep reading. Advaitacharya accused Nityananda Prabhu. You can eat up to 10 to 20 manas of rice. So 1 mana is... Anyone happen to know what a mana of rice is?
20 kgs.
1 mana is 20 kgs? Whoops, my calculation was 4 kgs. But then, so it's either 40 kgs of rice or 80 kgs of rice, which is a lot. How much was the most rice you ever ate? Not even 20 kgs, right? In one day. You can eat 10 to 20 manas of rice, and I am a poor brahmana. How shall I get so much rice? Yeah, Prabhupada says 4 kgs is a mana. Whatever you have, though it be a palmful of rice, please eat it and get up. Don't show your madness and strew the remnants of food here and there, because Nityananda Prabhu was avadita. In this way, Nityananda Prabhu and Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu ate and talked with the Dvaitacharya jokingly. And after eating half of each vegetable preparation given to him, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu abandoned it, because there were so many preparations, and went on to the next. But as soon as half of the vegetable in the pot was finished, Advaitacharya filled up the pot again. In this way, as the Lord finished half of a preparation, Advaitacharya again and again filled it up. After filling a pot with vegetables, Advaitacharya requested them to eat more. And Caitanya Mahaprabhu said, "How much more can I go on eating?" And Advaitacharya said, "Please do not give up whatever I have already given you. Now, whatever I am giving, you may eat half and leave half." So in the culture, it was their pleasure just to feed others. There was, in His Holiness Giriraj Maharaj's book, he tells the story that he had told me years ago many times, that in the beginning of their days in Mumbai, the devotees would sit, and they'd go to people's homes, and the people would love to feed them, and they would sit in lined rows, and Prabhupada would also take prasadam. And Giriraj Maharaj was then a brahmachari, and he wanted to be very austere, so when the man came around, the person serving came around with sweets for a second time, Giriraj Maharaj said, no, I'll take it. And Prabhupada looked at him and said, "Take a sweet and make an old man happy." And the man was, his pleasure was distributing food to others. So even giving is pleasurable, especially pleasurable. And giving, because it's giving someone else pleasure. So it's such a sweet mood. So again, Nityananda Prabhu jokingly said, "My belly is not yet filled up." Oh, excuse me. In this way, by submitting various humble requests, Advaitacharya made Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Nityananda eat. Thus Caitanya Mahaprabhu fulfilled all the desires of Advaitacharya. So his eating even was for Advaitacharya's pleasure. What consciousness is being exhibited. And that reminds me of another little story. Once on a morning walk, some devotee, young devotee, asked Prabhupada, "When I eat and there are so many bacteria in my stomach, when I eat prasadam, do the bacteria in my stomach get benefited from eating prasadam?" And Prabhupada replied, "You are so merciful that you eat for the benefit of others." Again, a little bit of sarcasm maybe there. But Mahaprabhu was eating just to fulfill the desires of Advaitacharya and Sita Thakurani. And the joking continues. Again, Nityananda Prabhu jokingly said, "My belly is not yet filled up. Please take away your food. I have not even taken the least of it." And after saying this, Nityananda Prabhu took a handful of rice and threw it on the floor in front of him, as if he was angry. And when 2 or 4 grains of the thrown rice touched his body. Advaita Acharya began to dance in various ways with the rice still stuck to his body. And when the rice thrown by Nityananda Prabhu touched his body, Advaita Acharya thought himself purified by the touch of remnants thrown by Paramhamsa Nityananda. Therefore, he began dancing. I'll just read a little of Prabhupada's purport. Advaita Acharya immediately felt himself purified of all smarta contaminations. What does smarta? What does it mean? What are the smarta contaminations?
Right.
It's very, very, very strict. You have to eat in this way. You have to. One of the devotees in Melbourne came from a very strict smarta family. And he told me when he was growing up, his grandfather, of course the culture is, couldn't continue. His grandfather saw him wearing short pants instead of a dhoti. And he couldn't believe it. Someone in his family would be wearing short pants. And he said, it sounds a little funny, but and then the grandfather said to him, and they used to, when they would bathe, at a certain season you'd face this way, another season you'd face this way, and you put the water on like this, and then you do this, and you do that, everything exactly. And he said, the next thing you'll be standing up or passing urine. You know, like the most abominable. How could it? It's a little gross, but excuse me. But the culture was, this is Smarta Brahmanism. You know, that there's a rule and a regulation for everything, but no thought or understanding of what the purpose of the rules and regulations are. So in this way, Advaita Acharya, Prabhupada said, he immediately felt himself purified because the Smarta Brahmins, they're very careful of who they sit next to when they're eating, who can sit in the line, the same line as them while they're eating. Very, very strict on these things that a contemporary Indian, or what to speak of a Westerner, can't understand what they're talking about, or without knowing the person's family. And one devotee who was born in a Brahmin family, he told me that when once in the village he was playing with a boy of a different caste, and when his mother found out, she made him bathe and change his clothes. You know, just a little kid is just a completely different universe. And therefore following, that's the Smarta Brahmanism. So Prabhupada said, the remnants of food left by a pure devotee, Vaishnava, called Maha Prasadam. This is completely spiritual and identified with Lord Vishnu. Such remnants are not ordinary. Advaita Acharya jokingly said, my dear Nityananda, I invited you, and indeed I have received the results. You have no fixed caste or dynasty, and by nature you are a madman. To make me a madman like yourself, you have thrown the remnants of your food at me. You did not even fear the fact that I am a Brahmana. So this is the two great faults: accepting sannyas order for enjoyment and following the Brahminical rules and regulations strictly without having an idea of or desiring to know the purpose, thinking that the following of them was indeed the purpose. And Nityananda replied, these are the remnants of food left by Lord Krishna. If you take them to be ordinary remnants, you have committed an offense. So in the midst of this, the glories of prasadam are described. And Srila Nityananda Prabhu continued, the only way you can be free from your offense is if you invite at least 100 sannyasis to your home and feed them sumptuously, and therefore your offense will be nullified. And Advaita Acharya replied, I shall never again invite another sannyasi, for it is a sannyasi who has spoiled all my Brahminical smriti regulations. After this, that was the end of their playful fight. Advaita Acharya made the Lords wash their hands and mouths. He then took them to a nice bed and made them lie down to take rest. Sri Advaita Acharya fed the two Lords cloves and cardamom mixed with tulsi flowers. Thus, there was a good flavor within their mouths. Sri Advaita Acharya then smeared the bodies of the Lords with sandalwood pulp and then placed very fragrant flower garlands on their chests. And when the Lord laid down on the bed, Advaita Acharya waited to massage his legs. But the Lord was very hesitant and spoke as follows to Advaita Acharya. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu said, Advaita Acharya, you have made me dance in various ways. I've done as you wanted for your pleasure, like you're pulling the strings and I'm doing just as you want. But now, give up this practice. Go with Mukunda and Haridas and accept your lunch. Thereupon, Advaita Acharya took prasadam with Mukunda and Haridas, and they all wholeheartedly ate as much as they desired. So we shall end here. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? What did you think of that argument between Advaita Acharya and Nityananda Prabhu?
Nice way of teaching.
Playful, but very serious instructions in there. Yes. Any questions? Yes.
Oh, I'm trying to understand. If someone wants to be austere, and then obviously the gateway to that is to control the tongue,
yes,
and so on and so forth. Eventually they can have some better control, have some better austere.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but what if, say for example, their circumstances, just off the top of my head an example, they work at a restaurant, a very nice prasadam restaurant, and they had to try the prasad to see if it tastes good, and they eat nice prasad. So, you know what I mean? Like, they want to be austere on the one hand, but then have their prescribed duty calls for them to do something that is in the way of them.
That really is off the top of your head. Do you know anyone in that situation?
I was just thinking of that as an example.
But do you know anyone in that situation?
Yeah.
You?
Not me.
Okay. But ask a question that's relevant to you.
Okay. Well.
See, because you have to be practical.
Yeah.
So, there's an easy way to answer that question. So if you were just asking really about what the person should do, and he wanted to be austere, like that, so he could eat a little just for a taste, and you wouldn't have to eat thousands of pieces of cheesecake just to taste it. But that's not what really, that answer wasn't really to what you wanted to know, because that's so obvious. So how do you balance all the seeming contradictions in life? That's more of the question. That one has to be intelligent and see who's actually balancing and succeeding in their balance, and speak to them. Just like so somewhere it will say one should not associate with non-devotees. Somewhere it will say something like that. But yet someone has a job and he has to work, and generally people aren't working only with devotees. So how do you balance that? So you find someone who's balanced, whose devotional service is growing, and you ask them how they're doing that. Or how do you bring up children who in Krishna consciousness? You find someone who's doing that successfully and speak to them and get some hints on how to do that, how to be a peaceful married couple. You find someone who's in a circumstance where you can relate to a circumstance similar to that, how to be and then you ask them how to do that, because there are always so many principles, and they're harmonized by balance. You take this much of this and this much of that, and it's balanced according to your circumstances and your capacity. Does that respond to your question? Okay. Any other questions? Yes?
That particular scene of Nityananda Prabhu throwing that rice was a little disturbing to a mind. Even though the conversation was playful, in the sense they were joking, but that scene was something which is disturbing.
So there wasn't a question attached to that, right? You were just mentioning it's disturbing. Don't be disturbed, okay? Because Nityananda, he's just doing whatever he wants to do. And how did Advaitacharya react to that? Did he get disturbed? What did he say? What was the first part? And then the second part, he responded as if he was disturbed. But what was the first? What was his first reaction? He started dancing in ecstasy, feeling himself completely purified and so fortunate, being touched by the remnants of Nityananda Prabhu. And then he said, "Look what you've done, you've ruined everything." He just continued the playing. And I'm a Brahmin, and by inviting a person like you, I've lost all my piety, I've lost my caste. So there's a premise inherent in this. When one is dealing with someone like Lord Nityananda, of course, there's no one quite like Lord Nityananda, but when you're dealing with Lord Nityananda, whatever he does is meant for everyone's good, and it is perfect. You may see it, you may not see it, you may understand it, you may not understand it, but it's springing from the platform of perfection. So don't be disturbed. What disturbed you about it? You shouldn't. Your mother taught you not to throw food on the ground. Of course, everyone's mother taught them that. So don't imitate Lord Nityananda.
And who exactly is an Avadut?
What is an Avaduta? It isn't. In ISKCON, sometimes we use the word Avaduta to mean someone who's very eccentric. But that's not what an Avaduta is. An Avaduta is someone who's completely beyond having to follow any social customs or rules and regulations, because the purpose of the rules and regulations and the social customs are to bring one to the spiritual platform where one is acting as a soul, even though in the material world, with no connection to the material body, just acting as a soul. So that's an Avaduta. So because say if someone is a PhD in nuclear physics, so when he goes to a junior high school, we don't have that here, a high school chemistry class, he doesn't have to do his homework because he's already. So an example of an Avaduta is given in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam. Who's the person who's perfectly happy just lying down, because internally his consciousness is upward and taking shelter of the spiritual platform. Dattatreya Muni. Is that clear? But you already knew that, yes?
Just trying to visualize it.
What would you like to visualize?
No, I've read about the pastimes of Nityananda Prabhu acting as an Avadut. So I was trying to
He was wearing.
whether he was consciously doing it or unconsciously that acts of Avadut were there.
He was just doing whatever he
Spontaneous.
wanted. Spontaneously doing what he wanted. Sometimes he would act spontaneously, and sometimes he would act on the order of Mahaprabhu. He would walk around wearing jewels. Because Mahaprabhu wanted him to act in a particular way. Sometimes he would roll on the ground in front of someone and beg them, I only have one, I'm rolling to beg you to please take shelter and chant the names of Caitanya Mahaprabhu, take shelter of Mahaprabhu. I beg you, I beg you, I beg you. But don't try that as a preaching tactic in downtown Perth. Rolling on the ground, begging people. The police will come and take you away.
Only if you're not wearing a mask.
and if you're going to do it, wear a mask. Make sure you wear a mask. How can one understand something so beyond everything that we've ever seen or learned in this world? So we're always cautioned not to imitate and just follow the rules and regulations properly, and then gradually we'll also become beyond. But we won't have to act like that necessarily. Because another principle will be to act in such a way that others will follow your example, they'll be benefited. So it's another principle, but Nityananda sometimes just acted like Nityananda does. Yeah.
Is it possible that some people didn't understand him as a
Please,
result of
could
his...
you contribute by...
There were some people who didn't understand him.
Yes?
They accepted Lord Chaitanya because he's from a Brahmin family background, and so they worshipped him, they offered him respect as a sannyasi, but they had an opposite feeling towards Lord Nityananda. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, for example, he had his older brother, so in the family, he couldn't accept Lord Nityananda's behavior. And so Krishnadas Kaviraj gave up his family at that point, because he said that to accept Lord Chaitanya and not accept Lord Nityananda was like accepting half a hen. They're together, they're all together. So Lord Nityananda, just thank you for explaining how Lord Nityananda was showing these, and Lord Advaitacharya was showing these two paths that we shouldn't follow. To be devotional in the guise of getting something, or being a strict follower of everything. We do everything right, but we have no sense of what the purpose of doing it is. These two paths are always open to us, and they stood up and did them, and it was disturbing to you, which is good.
So what did you learn from that?
Yeah, go to the purpose.
Because everybody's showing the example of some sort. This is Caitanya Caritamrta is all about teaching how to become a devotee. So they're the masters showing the examples of what not to be. So if you didn't,
And also showing the example of what to be.
Yes.
So in the next part, I wanted to get up to the end of this section. He'll show what to be, what to do in the association of devotees, because all the devotees from Navadip, they'll all come and see him, and Mother Satya will come too. And they've never seen him. His head is shaved, and before they saw him with his beautiful hair. And now they're going to see him. And here we shall end, because I don't want to continue past the time. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Sri Nityananda Prabhu ki jai, Caitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Advaita Acharya Prabhu ki jai, Sri Caitanya Caritamrta ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.